Hey everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What is shaking on your Thursday night? Hope you're having a good one. Guess what? I am going to tell you this evening everything you'd ever want to know about the legendary Paul McCartney is dead conspiracy. You can even call it that, and we're going to get into all the dirty details of it. Right now, though, please like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. Do all those free things. They're completely free. Help us with the algorithm, the almighty, all-powerful, all-seeing algorithm, and that is no conspiracy. It really exists. So we need you to smash. They always say smash that like button. I just want you to gently depress the like button. I don't need you to smash it because we want to have nice things. We do have super chats. We do have memberships. Please avail yourselves of those if you'd care to. Helps pay the bills around here. And then turn on those gifted memberships. It tells how right at the bottom of the scroll there. And you might get a free membership from a generous person that will allow you that exclusive members-only content that we do on the weekends. Jay Bizzle is here. Says, hey, Tom. Hello, Jay Bizzle, H2BH. And other things coming down off the heights of our John Daner program tomorrow. Very excited to tell you all the stuff. And there's a ton of it. A lot to unpack about this conspiracy about Paul McCartney being dead, which I'm not into conspiracies usually. I'm even less into this one, but it is interesting. It is very, very, very interesting. So we'll get into it here in just a second. Early in the show, we had Mike West was here, and also the Looney Tunes critic has wandered over from the Dabbleverse, where he creates a lot of great stuff. And he does an amazing impression of Orson Welles, which I admire, and it's very funny. And so we're glad to see him here this evening. At any rate, I don't know how many Beatles fans we have here. If you're not a Beatles fan, you probably don't know about the Paul McCartney is dead rumor, conspiracy, but we'll fill you in on it. And we'll do that in about a minute. 1 minute. We'll get to that. I always have to wait a little while. Let the room get a little, you just have to, just a little, So, anyway. That's what we're going to do in a minute. In just a minute. There are no subliminal messages in this show. There are no codes. There are no hidden secret messaging of any kind that you know of. So don't play the show backwards and try to find. There's nothing there. There's really, really nothing there. Anyway, let's get into it. Let me tell you about the Paul is dead conspiracy, which is really an urban legend or a conspiracy theory that claims Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was secretly replaced by a look-alike. Now, this whole thing started right here. See this box right here? It started in 1966. But let's put that off to the side and go to 1969. 1969 is when this whole thing really exploded and took off and went everywhere. But just to be clear, according to the theory, okay, Paul McCartney died in a car crash. And to spare the public from anguish and grief and the incredible heartbreak of one of the Beatles passing away, the surviving Beatles, and they were, by the way, helped by the British government, which was complicit in this, replaced Paul McCartney with a look-alike. And then, because they felt guilty about doing this, they communicated the secret through little details, little hints, little Easter eggs, if we want to use modern terminology, which I always like to do to street it up for the kids a little bit, like songs and album cover art, and people started hunting for clues everywhere. By October of 1969, this had become an international phenomenon, or however you say it. Eventually, however, because of the pervasive nature of this rumor invading everything the Beatles were doing, Life magazine published an interview with Paul McCartney late in 1969. This phenomenon has been the subject of college classes, sociologists, psychologists, mass communication experts, all throughout the 70s. Paul McCartney himself eventually leaned into it a little bit. I'll tell you about that. And Time magazine voted this among the top 10 most enduring conspiracy theories back in 2009. So how did this whole thing begin? Let's see here. Oh, you got a few comments. Yes, Looney Tunes credit. He blew his mind out in a car. Sandy says Tom is a 33-degree Kabbalah Freemason. That's just a rumor. I'm not, but the lookalike that does the show is via AI. The Beatles are a psyop. Sandy, your theory would have a lot more credence if you had spelled Beatles correctly. Sorry. Chef's in the house. He is a real chef, and we like to see him here. Looney Tunes critic says Life magazine published an interview with Billy Shears. Tom, you sheep. Well, jeepers creepers, man. Do you not notice my name for tonight's show? Right there. Wait, right. It's there, right there. Billy Shears is my cousin. Please, I'm all over it. Now, here's a photo of Paul McCartney in August of 1966. So, think what you will. Now, does that guy look like this guy to you? Are they the same guy? Look around the mouth and nose area. Don't concentrate so much on the eyes and the eyebrows, but look at the mouth. Is that the same guy? And the nose? Is that the same guy? I leave it to you, folks. Now, rumors that Paul's health was really bad started in early 1966. And the rumors that he had died started in September of that year. The Beatles had a press officer. His name was Tony Barrow. And he said that reporters from Fleet Street, the center of British journalism, more like tabloid journalism, started calling him up early in September of 1966 to confirm this rumor that Paul's health was really bad and maybe that he had even died. And he's like, I just spoke to him. He seemed alive when I was talking to him. For the rest of 1966, that rumor got pushed to the side because there were reports Paul was working on a solo project away from the Beatles and that the Beatles were just going to split up in 1966. That was helped along by the fact that most of the Beatles had disappeared from the public eye, and they postponed their tours for late of 1966. Truthfully, that was due to the fact that the Beatles were under an intense, non-stop schedule and really just stressed out, burnt out. They were having a little bit of a problem with their management, and they just stepped back from everything. Incidentally, if you really want to know some inside information about the Beatles, go to the TomGulleyShow.com. I did an interview with a wonderful British gentleman by the name of Ivor Davis, who was embedded with the Beatles during their first tour of the United States. And when I say that, I mean he wasn't just traveling along with them. He was in their hotel rooms. He was with the band, traveled to the shows with him and everything else. It's an amazing interview. He's a wonderful gentleman. It's at thetomgulley.com for free. Just for free, like the rest of the 270 podcasts you'll find there. The chef says Paul McCartney died, and the Paul McCartney we know today, whoever came up to him and said, you're going to be the new Paul McCartney today, boy, that guy's rich. Metal Maiden Vicky's here, says good evening to everybody. Great topic tonight. Metal Maiden Vicky, of course, was with us very recently. Sandy says record companies do this stuff all the time. Look at the young Eminem and look what he looks like now. Totally different height and bone structure. I think he is the real Slim Shady because he stood up. He stood up. He stood up. That's my own opinion on the Eminem controversy. In early 1967, the rumor came back to life in London, this time claiming Paul McCartney was killed in a traffic accident along the M1 motorway on the 7th of January. Now, the M1 motorway is it's about a 200-mile stretch of highway, which is relatively long for England, and it goes from London to Leeds. It's a very well-known highway, north-south. A lot of people have to use it, especially get to London from the south. So the rumor was addressed. It was acknowledged in a very popular Beatles publication called The Beatles Book. This was one of the, if not the leading fanzine for the Beatles. McCartney alluded to the rumor during a press conference held about the release of this album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And we'll get to a bunch of the stuff regarding this particular album cover because it plays heavily into a lot of the conspiracy theories, as do other album covers and songs from various other albums. The Beatles producer, George Martin, sometimes known as the fifth Beatle, he's very responsible for the Beatles achieving worldwide fame. He claimed that when they were in Denver, Colorado, there were a number of people that were hired, lookalikes, to act like they were the Beatles. It was misinformation. It was psyops. The Beatles got these lookalikes and kind of put them around in different places to distract the huge number, the tremendous crowds of people that were desperate, the screaming girls, the mobbing. He claims they got lookalikes to get the attention, the focus, the microscope off the Beatles while they were trying to get out of hotels, into this show, out of the show. In Rave magazine in 1966, it's claimed that they started using this tactic when they played in Baltimore in 1964. So then rumors started that the Beatles sent 4 lookalikes to actually play their shows on stage during their first American tour. And if you listen to my interview with Ivor Davis or read anything about that early U.S. tour, one of the things that was emblematic of that tour, well, 2 things: huge crowds in huge venues and terrible sound. The sound, not only on stage so that the Beatles could hear what they were playing, but to the crowd was just awful. So you really didn't hear the Beatles that much. It was the experience of being there, seeing them, being around the other Beatles fanatics that made it worth going to. Both Paul McCartney and George Harrison said that we didn't do that. We never did that. And then the other Beatles, and then as a group, they started just saying, this is poppycock. None of that ever happened. But the idea that 4 imposter Beatles were actually playing shows started to be attached with the notion that Paul McCartney had actually died. Now, by late 1967, it was stated that the Beatles covered up the death by employing a Paul McCartney impersonator to stand in for him. There was a journalist named Jay Marks who actually insisted that at Paul McCartney's engagement party, a friend of the band told him that McCartney had indeed been replaced, totally replaced. Here's a few more of your fine comments. Julian Caesar says, I mean, if you were going to clone someone, wouldn't it be Paul? Well, he was certainly the most photogenic of the group. That's a, by the way, not a very high bar. The Looney Tunes critic says, so you're saying the Beatles did Gallagher 2 first? Well, I think they were pretty upfront about the fact that Gallagher 2 wasn't Gallagher. But yes, I'm agreeing with you. Looney Tunes, no matter what you say, I'm going to agree with it. Sandy says, look up the many phases of Vladimir Putin. The celebrity replacement theory is real. Well, look at Elvis, for crying out loud. See him on the Ed Sullivan Show and then see him, at that last concert in Indianapolis. Is that the same person? I don't know. Julian Caesar says, in addition, Ringo sounded much better than usual, so it was very suspicious. Our good friend, Chris Cheshire, I call him the Cheshire Cat, unless he doesn't like that, in which case I never said it. Beatles lookalikes were used to help get the Beatles out of the Hollywood Bowl in their first appearance in Los Angeles. They got out in a school bus, and the real ones got out in an ambulance. There you go. The Wolf has joined us. He says, hello, folks. We do have, of course, the most cheerful chat room on the internet, as verified by independent sources. The Wolf, just one example of that. Now, the Beatles were known for sort of their experimental sounds and trying to push the envelope from a production standpoint. And by the mid-'60s, they were known for sometimes including backmasking in their music. For those of you who don't know, backmasking is a technique where a message is recorded backward into a track that's supposed to be played forward. And it's done so deliberately, okay? Although sometimes this phenomenon occurs unintentionally. Because, you don't know what your words are going to sound like backwards. People saying hi. And so, analyzing their music for these hidden backmasked messages became a huge trend in the United States. In November of 1968, their self-titled double LP called The Beatles, by the way, it's not called the White Album. Everybody calls it the White Album. The actual title of the album is The Beatles. Contained a track called Glass Onion. Now, John Lennon wrote this song, which was just a reaction to what he called the gobbledygook about the Sgt. Pepper album. And in later interviews, he said he was purposely confusing listeners with lines such as, the walrus was Paul, reference to I Am the Walrus, and the Magical Mystery Tour. He was intentionally putting various clues into the songs because they knew this was going on. And John Lennon was the kind of person that's like, that pisses me off. I'm going to go ahead and just confound these people intentionally. However, by the way, would you like to get a good look at the White Album? There you go. There's just some of the production value we bring you on a nightly basis here on the Tom Gulley Show. There was a guy named Tim Harper who in September of 1969, was an editor for the Drake Times-Delphic student newspaper at Drake University. And he published an article that was called, Is Beatle Paul McCartney Dead? And this article addressed a rumor being circulated everywhere and on campus that cited clues from recent Beatles albums, including a message interpreted as, turn me on, dead man, when heard on Revolution number 9, when it's played backwards. I am going to play that for you now and see if you get Turn Me On, Dead Man from this recording. One more time. I think it's a stretch, but some people were convinced. Also referenced was the back cover. I don't have the back cover for you, but the back cover of Sgt. Pepper, where every Beatle except McCartney is photographed facing the camera. And Paul is wearing a black badge that says OPD, officially pronounced dead. Now, on the front cover here, Ringo Starr is in a suit looking at the flowered grave in front of him. He's mourning. McCartney, in his suit, puts his hand on the shoulder of himself. Starr is looking sadly down at the tomb, which is shaped like a P if you look at it in a better resolution than I'm showing it to you here, with 4 strings that look like a bass. The front cover of the Magical Mystery Tour, this right here, has one unidentified band member in a different color suit from the other 3. According to music journalist Meryl Nodden, Harper's Drake Times Delphic was the first to publish an article on the Paul is dead theory, first one to do it. And Harper later said it had become a discussion of students at the start of a new academic year. And he said a lot of us, because of Vietnam and the so-called establishment, were ready, willing, and able to believe just about any sort of conspiracy. Now, in 1969, the Beatles released this album, Abbey Road. And oh boy, we'll get to that album cover in a second. On October 10th of that year, the Beatles press officer Derek Taylor said that recently we've been getting a flood of inquiries asking about reports that Paul is dead. We've been getting questions like that for years, of course, but in the past few weeks, we've been getting them at the office and at home and at night and during the day. I'm even getting telephone calls from disc jockeys and others in the United States. During this period, McCartney said he felt isolated from his bandmates because of their choice of business manager, a guy named Alan Klein. And they were distraught because John Lennon, had announced he was, but he didn't announce this to the world, he announced this to the rest of the Beatles, that he was going to leave the Beatles. With the birth of his daughter Mary in late August, McCartney had withdrawn to focus on his family life. And October 27th, the day the Paul is dead rumor became an international news story, McCartney and his wife Linda and their 2 daughters traveled to Scotland to spend time at his farm there. It starts to grow, and it keeps on growing. In October of 1969, a caller to Detroit radio station WKNR-FM told disc jockey Rush Gibbs about the rumor and his clues, because the mainstream really wasn't aware of the whole thing quite yet. Gibb and other callers then discussed the rumor on the air for the next hour, during which a whole bunch of additional clues were offered. 2 days later, the Michigan Daily, University of Michigan paper, published a satirical review of Abbey Road, and the guy who wrote it, a student named Fred Labor, he had listened to Gibbs's show under the headline, Paul McCartney Dead, New Evidence Brought to Light. And it had all the clues in it about the alleged death on the Beatles album covers, particularly the Abbey Road sleeve. Labor later stated he just invented a lot of the clues. And unfortunately for the Beatles, the story was picked up nationwide in newspapers across the United States. So very soon, every college campus in the United States had a resident expert on the clues of the Paul is dead conspiracy. WKNR fueled the rumor further with its 2-hour program called The Beatle Plot. The show, which has been called infamous, a fraud, it brought enormous worldwide publicity to Gibb and WKNR. The story was then taken up by even more mainstream news stations in the New York area, WMCA, which was a big station, but not as big as the other station, WABC. Yes, ABC's flagship New York station. During the early hours of October 21st, WABC disc jockey Roby Young discussed the rumor on air for over an hour before being pulled off the air for breaking format. At the time, it was play a song, play a song, play a song. I mean, they didn't want you stopping and talking for anything. Now, at that time of night, an AM station, you have to realize AM station's signal goes super far at nighttime. It's what's called amplitude modulation, okay? AM. That's where the signal is actually bounced off of the ionosphere, the level of the atmosphere above Earth. At nighttime, the level of the ionosphere gets much higher. So with the power that it has during the daytime, it goes in very short areas because that ionosphere is there to make it bounce, and it sort of peters out the power of the station. When it's up in the air, by the way, Ball State Broadcasting. Anyway, when it's up in the air like this, it goes a long distance because it's bouncing much further each time. And so WABC was heard in 38 states at that time of night, and sometimes in other countries. Okay? Side note, many of you know I was a news anchor at News Radio 1080 KRLD in Dallas. It also a 50,000 watt station, and it was heard in 37 states at nighttime. So this is a true thing. Now, the Beatles press office denied the rumor, but McCartney's withdrawal from public life for very good reasons just made the whole thing escalate. Okay? WMCA dispatched Alex Bennett. There's a U.S. radio station in New York, sent a guy to the Apple Corps headquarters in London. That was the headquarters for the Beatles. It had a store down in the bottom that sold clothes and Beatles stuff and everything else. And they did that to extend their Paul is dead theory. And guess what? He got to talk to at least one Beatle, Ringo Starr. And Ringo said, if people are going to believe it, they're going to believe it. I can only say it's not true. In a radio interview with John Small of WKNR, John Lennon said the rumor was insane, but it was good publicity for Abbey Road. On Halloween night, 1969, WKBW in Buffalo, New York, broadcast a program titled Paul McCartney is Alive and Well. Maybe. Which analyzed Beatles lyrics and other clues. The DJs included that the Paul is dead hoax was fabricated by none other than John Lennon. Before the end of 1969, several record companies and releases exploited this Paul is dead theory. Those included The Ballad of Paul by a band called The Mystery Tour, Brother Paul by a band called Billy Shears. We'll get into why that's important in a minute. And the All-Americans, So Long Paul by Werbley Finster, which is a pseudonym for Jose Feliciano. Zacharias and His Tree People were all Paul's bearers, parts 1 and 2. Another song was Terry Knight's St. Paul, which had actually been a minor hit in June of that year. And it was subsequently adopted by radio stations as a tribute to the late Paul McCartney. By the way, St. Paul was covered by a singer in New Zealand, and it reached the top of New Zealand's singles chart. According to a report in Billboard magazine in early November, there was a report that there was going to be a documentary LP of radio segments discussing this phenomenon, which was common in the day to package news stories or things and issue an LP. At any rate, many versions of the theory have sort of surfaced since it was first released to the public. Because why have just one theory? I'll tell you about some of them just after I get to some of your intrepid comments. People saying hi in their own way. The Wolf says, I used to own every Beatles album. My brother's friends decided I needed to share them and stole many of them. You know what, Wolf, I'm so sick of those dirty son of a guns. Those filthy son of a guns. Please, please. Metal Maiden Vicky is willing to believe. She says, I heard Turn Me On, but the Dead Man is debatable. I mean, Vicky says, but yeah, like you said, you don't know what your lyrics are going to sound like backwards, unless, of course, you've intentionally done it and figured it out and all that other hoo-ha. Sandy says the rock band Union Underground has a song called Turn Me On, Mr. Deadman. Well, there's another one, Sandy. Thank you for contributing that little deep cut for us tonight. Sandy Hooknose also says Tom needs his own late night conspiracy show on AM radio. Give Clyde Lewis the boot. And George Norrie, him too. The Wolf says, man, those blow torch signals. Julian Zeder says, methinks John Lennon doth protesteth too much. Yes. Chris Cheshire. Hey, Chris, thanks for showing. Chris is, man, he's only been with us a couple of weeks, and he brings the heat. Paul's death may be true because in an interview around 1965, a reporter asked him what it's like to perform and make albums. Paul answered it was the first 2 years were fun, but then it became work. Well, I don't know. Wolf says, imagine being a Beatle and having the wives with the worst singing voices ever. Linda and Yoko, is that what you're talking about? Chef says, I guess I know what album I'm going to listen to tonight. Well, listen to it forward. Who listens to them backwards? Well, and it hasn't, and I bet it's happened because everything's happened in, music business, but has anyone ever done an album with like one side of the album is forward and the other side is the same thing, only backward? If not, I copyright that right now. And they owe me, they do it. Okay, so the most common theory maintains that on the 9th of November, it was the 9th of November, 1966. And this next part is kind of plausible. Paul McCartney had an argument with his bandmates during a Sgt. Pepper recording session. That makes sense. They argued all the time. But then he drove off angrily in his car, blew his mind out in a car. Hey, as a Looney Tunes critic says, we don't know. He drives off angry in his car and then was distracted by a meter maid. Lovely Rita, meter maid. And he failed to notice that the traffic lights had changed, which is from A Day in the Life. Woke up, got out of bed, rang the comb across my head. And at that point crashed and was decapitated. There's allusions to that in the song Don't Pass Me By. A funeral service for McCartney was held with eulogies by George Harrison. Blue Jay Way might be a song with clues about that. And Ringo Starr also. Don't Pass Me By might have some clues there. Followed by a procession. The procession is depicted on this front cover of the Abbey Road album. Now, check it out. John Lennon in the front, okay, is the priest. Dressed all in white. He's the priest. Okay? And he buries them with the alleged I buried Paul statement in Strawberry Fields, which I believe John Lennon claims is cranberry sauce. To spare the public from the grief, they replaced him with this winner of the lookalike contest. And that whole idea was helped further along by the Beatles' recent retirement from live performances and choosing to present themselves with the new look of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club album. Now, the stand-in, according to some people, was an orphan from Edinburgh named William Campbell, who the Beatles then trained to impersonate McCartney. Others contend, and I think this is the more popular version, that the man's name was Bill Shepherd, later altered to Billy Shears. And the replacement was instigated by Britain's MI5, out of concern for the severe distress McCartney's death would cause the Beatles' audience. In this later telling, the surviving Beatles were said to be racked with guilt over replacing their beloved bandmate, and therefore that's why they left these messages in their music and album artwork, so that their fans would finally know the truth. Despite all of this, dozens of supposed clues to McCartney's death have been identified by fans and followers of the legends, including messages perceived when listening to the backmasking, symbolic interpretations of lyrics and album cover images. Now, two of the biggest examples that they cite are the words "I buried Paul," spoken by Lennon at the very end of the song Strawberry Fields Forever, which I mentioned just a second ago. And Lennon claims that it was really not "I buried Paul," but cranberry sauce. And the words from Revolution number 9 that I played for you just a few minutes ago. "Turn me on, dead man, turn me on, dead man," when played backwards. Now, a similar reversal at the end of "I'm So Tired," which is another track off the White Album. It's supposedly you can hear "Paul is dead, man, miss him, miss him, miss him, miss him," but, you know. What don't you hear in a backwards album lyric? Now, another example is this interpretation that I started to tell you about just a second ago on the cover of the Abbey Road album, the funeral procession. Lennon is white. He's a heavenly figure, a priest, somebody otherworldly. Ringo Starr, right behind him, is dressed in black, and he symbolizes an undertaker. George Harrison, in the denim in the very, very back, represents the grave digger. And McCartney, the only one that's barefoot, and he's out of step with the others. If you look at the picture, all the others have left leg forward. Paul McCartney does not. He, therefore, is out of step. And he would then, being barefoot, represent the corpse. If you look to the left, you will see that Volkswagen. If the photo was better, you could, I don't want to get, struck. If you look at that, you will see that the license plate contains the characters LMW281F, mistakenly read by many people as 281F, and that was cited at as more evidence 28 if, and that was supposed to represent McCartney's age if he had been alive, although Paul McCartney was 27 when the album was recorded and released. LMW is supposed to have stood for Linda McCartney Weeps, or Linda McCartney Widow, although McCartney and the then Linda Eastman had not yet met in 1966, the year of his alleged death. That's another thing, is that if you look at Paul's hand there, Paul's left-handed, but he holds a cigarette in his right hand, and that also was supposed to sort of help along the idea that that's not really Paul McCartney. By the way, like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell, all those free things you can do. Won't cost you a cent to hit that like button. That helps us with the algorithm, the almighty, all-powerful algorithm, which, if you play what I just said back, says, anyway, that will help us with the algorithm. We'd appreciate that. Also, we do have super chats. It's hard to tell on this particular program tonight, but we do have super chats. We do have memberships, and that helps us pay the bills around here. Plus the fact we would encourage you to turn on those gifted memberships. It tells how. Right at the bottom, it's telling how right now. And you can get a free membership from a generous person and get that members-only exclusive content that you so desperately crave and you so rightfully deserve. Now, how did the Beatles respond to all this? Well, in October, because remember, 1969 is the year it's exploded. Happened in 66 to begin with. It's when the seed was planted, but we had a full-grown forest in 1969. October of 69, the Beatles press office issued a bunch of statements about the rumor, saying it's a load of old rubbish, and that the story has been circulating for about 2 years. We get letters from all sorts of nuts that Paul, though, is still very much with us. On the 24th of October, BBC radio reporter Chris Drake was granted an interview with McCartney at his farm. McCartney said the speculation was understandable, given that he normally did an interview a week to remain in the news. Part of the interview was first broadcast on Radio 4 on the 26th of October, and subsequently to WMCA in the United States. McCartney had agreed to do the interview in hopes that people hearing his voice would see the light, but didn't convince any of these people. Meanwhile, McCartney was secretly filmed by, in this day and age, we have like First Amendment auditors and other people that will camp out and take pictures of you. Well, that wasn't done at this time. There was a lot more respect, especially for the privacy of celebrities. But McCartney was secretly filmed by a CBS News crew as he worked on that farm in Scotland. As in his and Linda's segment in the Beatles promotional clip for Something, which the couple filmed privately around this time, McCartney was unshaven and scruffy, which was very unusual for that time. Later on it would not be, but at that time it was. His next visitors were a reporter and a photographer from Life magazine. Now, again, this was not common for this sort of intrusion at the time, and McCartney became irate. He swore at this photographer and a reporter. He threw a bucket of water on them and was captured on film attempting to hit the photographer. Very quickly, though, Paul McCartney says, yeah, that kind of thing could maybe make me look like a jerk. So he approached the pair and he said, look, I will pose for a photo with my family and I will give you an interview. In exchange for you giving me that roll of film where I'm about to kick the ass of both of you. They agreed, and all parties got together, and thus you see the Life magazine cover before you. Following the publication of the article and the photo, the rumor started to decline. This had the intended effect, to some extent. In the interview, McCartney said the rumor was bloody stupid, and went on to say, perhaps the rumor started because I hadn't been in the press much lately. I hadn't done enough press for a lifetime, and I don't have anything to say to these days. I'm happy to be with my family, and I will work when I work. I was switched on for 10 years and have never switched off. I am now switching off whenever I can. I would rather be a little less famous these days. Well, in November of 1969, Capitol Records sales managers reported a significant increase in sales of Beatles catalog albums. And they attributed that to these rumors. Their vice president of national merchandising, hold on a second. National Merchandising estimated that this is going to be the biggest month in the history of Beatles album sales. The rumor benefited the commercial performance of Abbey Road in the United States, where it very comfortably outsold all of the band's previous albums. Sgt. Pepper and the Magical Mystery Tour, both of which had been off the charts since February, re-entered the Billboard Top LP chart, peaking in the top 100. But then, a television special dedicated to the Paul is Dead thing was broadcast on WOR in New York. Titled Paul McCartney, The Complete Story, told the first and last time. It was set in a courtroom and was hosted by celebrity lawyer F. Lee Bailey, who cross-examined some of these authors and radio personalities, including the guy from Drake, Labor, and Gibb from Detroit, and other proponents of the theory, and heard opposing views from witnesses such as McCartney's friend Peter Asher, his brother Mike McCartney, and the band's representative, Alan Klein, who importantly wasn't Paul McCartney's representative. He represented the other three members of the band. Linda Eastman and her father managed to get Paul's representation, and that was one of the main schisms in the Beatles that caused their breakup. F. Lee Bailey left it to the viewer to determine a conclusion. Now, before the recording, Labor, the kid from Drake that wrote that first article, told F. Lee Bailey that his article has been intended as a joke, to which Bailey sighed and replied, "Well, we have an hour of television to do. You're going to have to go along with this." McCartney returned to London in December of 1969. Bolstered by the support of his wife Linda, he began recording his debut solo album at his home in St. John's Wood. Titled McCartney and recorded without his bandmates' knowledge, it was one of the best-kept secrets in rock history until shortly before its release in April of 1970. And that's, according to a lot of people, what led to the Beatles' breakup. In his 1971 song, How Do You Sleep, in which he attacked McCartney's character, John Lennon described the theorists as freaks who was right when they said you was dead. The rumor also cited in the hoax surrounding the Canadian band Klaatu after a January 77 review of their debut album, 347 EST. And that sparked rumors that Klaatu were in fact the Beatles, which is not true if you've heard any of Klaatu's music. Anyway, some people even said that that debut album in 1977 was recorded in 1960. It's just nuts. There's been a lot of analysis of this and a major legacy of it. I'll get to some of that information here in a second. Just after I get to your intrepid comments and give you a better view of this not that high resolution image of the magazine that I provide free of charge. Let's see here. Julian Zeezer says, there are lists published on the net of words and phrases you can sing which sounded like something else when played backwards. Thank you, Julian. Thank you. The Wolf said, if that ever happened, it would have been Zappa to do it. Well, I will have a connection to Frank Zappa very shortly for you. Jack Hoffman is here, says, hello, everyone. Hello, Jack. Metal Maiden Vicky says, I saw a meme the other day of a fake album with Yoko Ono and Fran Drescher collaborating. Can you imagine? Yes, Fran Drescher. Shockingly, a better voice than Yoko Ono. It's good stuff. The Wolf says, hello, Jack. We do have the most cheerful chat room on the internet, as verified by independent sources. Julian Zeezer says, I wouldn't let Yoko play a tambourine. Singing, it should be against the law. Wolf says, I can imagine metal. Horrible. Adeline Vicky says, Julian, interesting. I didn't know about those lists. People saying hi. People saying hi. People saying hi. The Wolf says, Linda and Yoko singing could be used as a weapon capable of vaporizing the earth. Well, in her defense, Linda didn't sing that much. People saying hi, people saying hi, people saying hi. Funky Bronco here. I'm going to say he's had a lot to drink. Julian Zeezer says, I played an Elvis album backward. It was a recipe for fried bananas. I'm going to tell you what, this is a recipe for fried bananas. Well, we'll get into a recipe in the back masking here shortly as well, Julian. A little foreshadowing. Let's see here. Jack says, Alan Klein, the founder of the record company, is a Hungarian. Funky Bronco says, anyone know where Doc Torn is? Well, Funky Bronco, our good friend Doc Torn has his lady friend visiting this week. So I hope he doesn't show up. I hope he's off doing fun things with her because she travels down from Canada to visit him. Wolf is sure that he will appear. Jack says Alan Klein killed Paul McCartney and replaced him with a replacement. Case closed. I don't know why he would do that since he didn't represent Paul. Funky Bronco says Doc is the voice of reason. He is. Well, that makes one of us, Funky. Jack says 10 likes and only 11 watching. Tom Gulley win. Yes. Thank you, Jack. Thank you. We'll get far more than 10 views. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. The Wolf says those reporters were jerks. A bunch of real jerks. We get a lot of views from, well, I won't mention where we get them. Julian says that's a nice picture. It is a nice picture. Chris Cheshire says, interesting that in 1969 when Paul married Linda, none of the other Beatles were either not invited or didn't show. Wolf says, Chris, they heard her sing. The Beatles were very frosty at that time. They were getting pretty frosty with each other. Jack says, oy vey, it's very suspicious that Tom doesn't want to talk about Alan Klein. Alan Klein was sort of an opportunist. And I think that whole who's going to represent us thing was very contentious with the Beatles. Linda Eastman and her father, especially her father, was a very savvy businessman. And he recognized Klein right off as, you don't want this guy. And by the way, why do you all want to be represented by the same guy? In the way that he was representing them. The Wolf says, Jack, would you like some German chocolates? We have some Pervertine in the back if you're getting a little draggy. Let's see. Jack says the Hungarians were very antagonistic against the Czech people. Play Kingdom Come, Deliverance too. Well, I'll get right on that, Jack. Thank you for tipping me off to that. Julian Caesar says, has Lennon ever said anything that wouldn't have been better left unsaid? Yeah, he said some good things. He said a lot of crazy things, but he said a couple of good things. He wrote some great songs. The Wolf says, Varata Niktu. You mean Klaatu, Barada Niktu. Wolf is quoting lines from the day the earth stood still. Julian Caesar says, Fran Drescher, star of Spinal Tap. She's awesome in Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap also kind of part of this in a second. Kind of. Not very much. Just a smidge. A teeny tiny tinge. Chris Cheshire says the online photo of Paul and William Shears Campbell looks like the same person. Well, but the fact that you see them together, my good man, would be evidence enough. You know. Yeah. A lot of people believe that the climate of the times was responsible for this. There was a lot of conspiracy theories regarding the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. There was a lot of mistrust of what me and my friends at the time liked to call the man or the establishment. The Beatles were kind of responsible, according to some people, because of their incorporation of all these random lyrics and effects and the intentional sort of let's send these people on a wild goose chase stuff that John Lennon especially was indulging in. And was also helped along by Charles Manson's nutty interpretation of the White Album. In the 70s, this whole Paul is Dead thing actually became a subject of academic study in sociology, psychology, and communications, like mass hysteria, mass conspiracy theories. Another social critic believes the Paul is Dead phenomenon is traced back to some ancient Greek traditions and stuff, which is a real stretch. Very, very big stretch. Similar rumors concerning celebrities have been circulated. There's an unsubstantiated rumor that Canadian singer Avril Lavigne died in 2003 and was replaced by a person named Melissa Vandella. Yeah. There we go. There we go. There have been many other sort of references to this in popular culture. A lot of tip of the cap. A lot of tip of the cap, if you will. Okay? I'll get to those, and I got a couple of quick things here. Michael Rennie was ill the day the earth stood still, and he showed us where to stand. And Flash Gordon was there in silver underwear. Claude Rains was the invisible man. And somewhere... Anyway. Rocky Horror fans, anyone? We need to do a show on Rocky Horror. Middleman Vicky says, Julian, yes, she was great in This Is Spinal Tap. Don't you find that offensive? Don't you find that offensive? It's a black glove with... Anyway. She's all nice at first, too. She's super nice, and then just... Anyway. In June of 1970... Oh, wait, there's a couple other things we got to do. Nice, Tom. Well, thank you. Thank you. I would make a great riffraff. Some have said I would make a better Frank, but most say I should be Eddie. Whatever happened to Saturday night? We got the job and, no seem the same since Cosmic Light came into my life. I thought I was divine. I used to go for every chick could go and listen to the music on the radio. Okay, sorry. Jay Warren said Paul died of AIDS he caught from Jimmy Savile. Plausible, but not likely. Julian Zeezer, thank you, Julian Zeezer. He has gifted one Tom Gulley Show membership. Somebody please on YouTube tell me who got that membership. And for that, Julian, of course, you get the point. Yes, anyone donating a free membership or a super chat, well, you'll get the most coveted of Tom Gulley Show acknowledgments, and that is, of course, the point. Well done, Julian. Jay Warren says, Crocodile Rock, only he doesn't spell it like I do. The Wolf says, Mary Jacobs. Mary Jacobs got it from over at the Pot Awful Cult. Well, Mary, congratulations. She's not here right now. Pot Awful's doing a show right now, so she's not here. Anyway, in June of 1970, there was an issue of DC. Which of these photos should I put up while I'm talking? Well, I kind of like this one. Let's put that up there. In June of 1970, the DC Comics Batman comic had a story titled Dead Till Proven Alive, which it was rumored that Saul from the band Oliver Twists was deceased and replaced with a double. On the cover of this particular comic book, Robin is holding an album that mimics the back of the Sgt. Pepper's album. In 1972, National Lampoon had a comedy album called Radio Dinner that has several announced clues placed throughout, including backmasked segments and notes in the album's gatefold parodying the hoax. Now, This Is Spinal Tap mockumentary was kind of replicated in a mockumentary by a conglomeration of people, some of whom were in Monty Python, and it was called The Ruttles. And it was a very clear parody of the Beatles. It was 1978. It was a television film over in England, and it totally lampooned the Beatles' history. All You Need Is Cash is the title of it. But it was a band called The Ruttles. And the identity of the allegedly dead band member was transferred to the George Harrison character. Yes, George Harrison took part in this. Harrison was really big into movies and friends with all the Monty Python cast. And his character was named Stig O'Hara, who was supposed to have died in a flash fire at a waterbed shop, of all things, and was replaced by the Madame Tussauds wax model. So he was replaced by a wax model. And so they built on George Harrison's reputation on being the quiet Beatle. And the Stig is dead theory was supported by his lack of dialogue in the film and clues like his trouserless appearances on the cover of the Ruddles' Abbey Road album. By the way, if you've never seen All You Need Is Cash, it's hilarious. If you're a Beatles fan or if you just like sort of mockumentaries, it's pretty good. And this is legendary. If you've never seen this, it is available online. On the February 13th, 1993, oh my God, it's February 13th right now, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it is. Yep, February 13th. So this is 2003, 2013, 32 years ago to this very moment. Paul McCartney was interviewed on the Chris Farley Show. This is a recurring sketch where Chris Farley would nervously ask questions of his guests. Usually, did they remember things that actually happened to him? Remember that time when you were in the Beatles? Anyway, regarding the Paul is dead rumors, remember the time when they said you were dead and, they replaced you with the double? That was a hoax, right? Got huge laughs. And Paul McCartney said, yes, I wasn't really dead. Anyway, Paul McCartney leaned into this thing. In 1993, he had a live album, and it was called Paul is Live, in reference to the hoax. And he also presented it in a sleeve that parodied the Abbey Road album and all of its clues. A 1995 video for Free as a Bird, which was a song recorded by Lennon in the late 70s and completed by Paul McCartney, Harrison, and Starr for the band's anthology references Paul is Dead, among other myths related to the Beatles' impact during the 60s. There you are. 1999, he did a 1995 episode of The Simpsons entitled Lisa is... Let me start over. In a 1995 episode of The Simpsons entitled Lisa the Vegetarian, Paul McCartney himself guest stars and mentions that if his song, Maybe I'm Amazed, is played backwards, it contains a recipe, Julian, for lentil soup. That song plays over the end credits, and if played backwards, it not only contains the aforementioned recipe, but also McCartney himself saying, oh, and by the way, I'm alive. So he was really leaning into this. Very much so. Very much so. In 2010, American author Alan Goldshire published the mashup novel Paul is Undead, the British Zombie Invasion, which depicts all of the Beatles as zombies, except Ringo Starr. I want to point out, by the way, that when the Beatles all went solo, for a few years there, right after they went solo, the Beatles' individual albums by Paul and George and John didn't do that well, particularly with hit airplay. You know the one who did do really well? Ringo Starr. And a lot of rumors started about that Ringo Starr had secretly been the genius behind the music of the Beatles, because Ringo had Oh My, Photograph. He had a string of hits. The No No song, he did really well. Anyway, Paul McCartney is Really Dead, The Last Testament of George Harrison, is a 2010 mockumentary that supposedly tells the story of George Harrison believing himself to be on his deathbed after being stabbed on December 30th, 1999, revealing that McCartney had died in a car crash when a girl named Rita and the British intelligence agencies had orchestrated a cover-up through which he was, replaced by a lookalike. The film is narrated by a voice actor who claims to be George Harrison, describing over archival footage and reenactment the clues left behind in all of these songs. A 2018 comedy short, Paul is Dead, depicts version of events where McCartney dies during a musical retreat and is replaced by a lookalike named Billy Shears. Yes. And there's plenty of others. I'm not going to read them to you because they're kind of deep cuts of bands and things that only a super genius like Metal Maiden Vicky would know. Anyway, let's see here. Metal Maiden Vicky with $4. Thank you so much for the $4. She says that's for singing part of 2 Rocky Horror Picture Show songs. From the day I went away, oh my. Don't Dream It, Be It is one of my big inspirational songs that I listen to. But I can do the whole thing, as I'm sure you can too, Metal Maiden Vicky. Every line, every single thing, including the 2 songs not on the album of the soundtrack. You better be careful. Janet Weiss. And what's the other one? The Sword of Damocles is the other one. And those aren't on the soundtrack album. I'm sure there's a soundtrack album there with those on them, but the original soundtrack album did not have those 2 songs. Damn it, Jen, I love you. The road was long, but I ran it. Anyway. The Wolf says George wrote a song about Formula One. Wow. George was an interesting guy. The movie Time Bandits, several other movies, he was the producer of very successful films. He was an interesting dude, George was. But anyway, that is all I have to tell you tonight about the Paul is Dead conspiracy. And with that, I will open the phone lines briefly, or not. We'll see. And we'll talk about it a little more. What do I think? I think he's alive. I think he's always been alive. I think people have a little too much free time. That's what I think. Why doesn't anybody start at a Tom Gulley is Dead? Why hasn't that ever happened? Why isn't there some bizarre, that's not really Tom Gulley thing happening? That's what I'd like to know. That's, it just seems like a natural to me. Melanie Vicky says, I was fortunate enough to see Rocky Horror Picture Show at the 8th Street Playhouse in New York with Sal Piro hosting. My sister Lori and her boyfriend at the time took me and a friend, and it was wild and trippy experience. The first time I saw Rocky Horror. Let's see here. Middle name Vicky says, just one of the many times I've seen the movie. The Wolf says, no one has stated it because you are a jerk. The guy's a real jerk. Well, no one started it either because I'm a jerk. I'm a real jerk. The first time, let me see here. Yeah, the first time I saw Rocky Horror, I was, I think, maybe 16 or so, and it had become a pretty big phenomenon. And my best friend, maybe I was 17, I can't remember the exact dates, but I was working at a McDonald's in high school. One of the managers there was in college, and he had a girlfriend. He was going to Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis, and he had a girlfriend that was at Purdue. So he and I drove up there, and we're just going to hang out for the weekend. She had an apartment up there, and I was underage, and I got served because it's a college campus. So, of course, they served me. Got pretty well. I was feeling no pain. He was there with his girlfriend. I was just tagging along. And we were in the line for Rocky Horror, and I started chatting up this college girl, which for a high school guy was like, oh my God, there's a college girl talking to me. Jeez. And we went into the movie, and she sat next to me, and I don't remember that much of the movie, although I do remember some of the things, and I had a great time. It was a blast. And then the next time I saw it was in my hometown at the little Carmel Theater, which was this wonderful Art Deco from the 30s movie house. It was wonderful. They've since knocked it down because they're a bunch of jerks. Anyway, since then, I've seen it over 150 times. And as I am sure Metal Maiden Vicky and the Wolf will attest, there used to be a thing called the Midnight Movie. It was in every town. On Saturday nights and Friday nights, they would show movies at midnight because they knew they were going to get every kid on earth. That was a cool thing. And there were certain titles that you would see at the midnight movie, one of which was Flash Gordon. Sometimes they would show Reefer Madness. Sometimes they would show, say, I don't know, what's the one with Breaking Point? They would show cult films, basically. And whatever day they would establish for Rocky Horror Picture Show, I've seen it at a theater over 150 times. Of course, I own it now on a Blu-ray. But at the time, I was a big Rocky Horror guy. We're going to do a show on Rocky Horror. Let me write that down so I don't forget it. Let me write that down. What's the name of a spaceship? Columbia. What's the name of a color? Magenta. Rocky Horror. By the way, my big move, because it's crowd participation, my big move was I was the guy that would run up and stop the globe from spinning. And let me tell you, that's a very important thing to do, number one. But it's also something that, unlike a lot of the things people do, it's easy to take the newspaper and make the smoke go away and to throw the toast and all. But to make the globe, you really have to have the timing down. I would like, if I may, anyway, the narrator may be my favorite character in the movie. I don't know. Phone lines are open at 972-994-6822. See, Lori took me the first time to see Rocky Horror Picture Show. It was at the State Theater in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when she was attending the University of Michigan. That's pretty awesome. Julian Caesar said, did Meatloaf ever do the live shows? That's a damn good question. I have to imagine that he did at least once. I'll try and look into that. Chef says, good night, Gracie, everyone. Good night, Chef, and happy cooking. Jack says, the real Tom Gulley died years ago, and Jesse P.S., the necromancer, brought him back to life. Yes, with pieces of disembodied corpse. He managed to find the head. This is all that's left of really me. The rest is all... The Wolf says, I saw it at our town theaters after we had Budweiser biscuits and gravy at the Monon Grill. Metal Maiden Vicky says, yeah, I always have to turn. I don't know why it does this when I go to phone lines, but it drops my sound a little. Yes, midnight movies. We had a movie theater in my town that showed all sorts of cool midnight movies. They never played Rocky Horror Picture, though, because it was playing down county in New Rochelle, New York, the home of Dick and Laura Petrie. I believed they lived in New Rochelle on the Dick Van Dyke Show. Metal Main Vicky says, but yeah, what fun. It was really fun. One of the versions, because I have the DVD and I also have the Blu-ray, one of the versions I have has tons of extras, one of which is a full performance of the movie at the big famous place in New York where they do it. It's a legendary place. And it basically shows the screen and everyone interacting in what they do there. It's pretty cool. Yes, they did live in New Rochelle. Yeah, well, every now and then a blind pig finds a truffle. Yep. Yeah, we're going to do Rocky Horror. Mm-hmm. It was great when it all began. I was a regular Frankie fan. But it was over when he had the plan to start working on a muscle man. And the Wolf, of course. Wolf would play Rocky because he's the most muscular of the group. And I know the Wolf has said to people he was training in bodybuilding, in just 7 days, I can make you a man. By the way, I have to blame you people for something. You're all in need of blame. Because during last night's absolutely majestic expose, diatribe on the legendary John Dehner, during that wonderful pageant of all things John Dehner, I mentioned that John Dehner was on an episode of A Man Called Shenandoah. And I sang the theme song, the opening to A Man Called Shenandoah. And it has been an earworm in my head for the last 24 hours, and it's all your fault. Incidentally, I did get a few things wrong yesterday. I called Dandy Jim Diamond Jim, which is wrong. And, yeah. So, Metal Man Vicky says, excellent. I'm also a Tim Curry fan. His movies and his solo albums. So good. Well, let's see here. You had... Was there an album called Simplicity? There was one with Paradise Garage on it. It was called Be Something, maybe. I have the solo albums too, but the two good ones are the one that's sort of green with him in long hair. It's the one with Paradise Garage on it. It's also the one with I'm So Blank and Lonely, and I feel like I'm gonna die. I think that's Slow Gin is the name of that song. But then there's the one with Simplicity, and on that one he's standing like on a beach. It's this full body shot. I've got those two. There's another one, and then I also have the best of Tim Curry, which has Alan and a whole bunch of other stuff on it. Yes, Fearless and Read My Lips. Those are good albums, man. Those are some incredible solo albums. Simplicity might just be on the Fearless album. I think that might be the case on that one. I'm probably misremembering that. And I haven't listened to either one of those in a while. I went down to Paradise Garage. I took my place in line. I said, I'm feeling fine. I'm a stranger to Nevada. I don't box outside my weight. Anyway. You no good, filthy son of a gun. You tried to mislead us with false information. You're a real jerk. The guy's a real jerk. Just a jerk. He does a lot of cover. He does Anyone Who Had a Heart. There's one with the opens with the bagpipes and stuff. It's just great stuff. Metal Maiden Vicky says, yes, I have that album too. Oh, best of album too. What about I Do the Rock? I do. Myself. I do the rock. I believe eating campaign parties in Touchdown Road. Osbert giving campaign parties. Tasha's got the cold. Alice making tea. Me, I do the only thing that still makes sense to me. I do the rock myself. Anyway, Metal Man Vicky says, great videos for I Do the Rock and Paradise Garage, too. Yeah, there's some good stuff. See, now I'm going to have to listen to that stuff. Metal Man Vicky says, too many references in I Do the Rock. Yes. Way too many. Way, way, way too many. 972-994-6822. Let me just get that. Tim Curry, it really makes me sad. The state of his health these days after the stroke. It's very, very, very. It's just so sad. It is so sad. He's 78 years old, and it's just very sad. Very, very sad. He's used a wheelchair since having a major stroke in July of 2012. Does mostly voice acting, and he does perform as a singer, and he does make appearances at fan conventions. In October of 2020, Tim Curry reprised his role as Dr. Frank N. Furter at a live table reading of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And it's just sad. Just very sad. By the way, he's really into horticulture. He's a gardening guy. Very much into that, and would refurbish gardens of his celebrity friends all over Los Angeles. But it's difficult to see him now. He was on an episode of Monk where he had prosthetics. He was a character on Monk, maybe more than one episode, and only appeared in a bed. But it's just so sad. Just so sad. John and Yoko farming beef, raising protein quota. Sometimes they make love and art inside the Dakota. Rodney's feeling sexy. Mick is really frightfully bold. Solzhenitsyn, Nietzsche, Einstein, Baby Ruth, Dizzy Dean, Little Mo, Virginia Wade, Pistol Pete, O.J. Simpson, DiMaggio, Newt Rockney, Liz and Dick and Britt and Liza, Jacqueline, Kate and Farrah, the Charlie's Angels, Meg and Roddy, John Travolta, Governor Brown and Linda, People Magazine, Miss Rona Barrett at the time. People don't remember Rona Barrett. There's another show idea. Rona Barrett. Man, she was huge. Where did my pen? Oh, there's my pen. Rona Barrett. Rona Barrett. Where did she go off to? Carter, Begin, Sadat, Brezhnev, Castro. That's loud. That's really loud. That's just really loud. Hi, and welcome to the Tom Gulley Show. You're on the air. Who am I speaking with?
It's Fezzi McCool. How's it going, Tom?
It's fine.
Fine? Go fuck yourself, you cunt.
It's almost physically impossible. Oh, now see, he didn't even unlock the secret of how he does that to himself. That's just rude. That's just rude. I think that guy kind of expected me to know who he is. That's really sad. Okay, so very, very sad to see him that way. Have you ever watched the TV show with Tim Curry and Annie Potts called Over the Top? Classic stuff. I think I did see that. Kind of life is a rock, but the radio rolled me by Reunion. Many references. Got to turn it up louder. So my DJ told me. BB Bubble and the Stingers, Mama Hooper, Rachel Singers, Lonnie Mac and Twang and Eddie. Here's my ring. We're going steady. Take me easy. Take me high. Lie. Has a fire. Cocoa motion. Cocoa back and stay. Satisfaction. Day, baby. Gotta gimme. Getting out of sound. Look at your mind. Bounds and the story. My life is a. I can probably do that if I try real hard. The Wolf says that guy's a real jerk. Guy was a real jerk. What was that guy thinking? He's a real jerk. That's the best he had. He reached deep into the gunny sack, the burlap bag of his intellect, and that's the best he had. Suggesting that I somehow, through a freak of nature, a double-jointed pelvis, something, could in some way, through a hermaphroditic freak of nature, engage, in flagrante delicti with myself, which is, of course, ludicrous on its face, particularly when I spend so much time with his mother. That was me. Was that me? I think that was probably me. I'm sorry. Guy was a real jerk. Was I supposed to know who that was? He says his name was something McCool. I couldn't hear the first part of it. It's like, am I supposed to know who that is? Because nobody does anywhere and never will, much like your own real name. Metalman Vicky says, okay, now I want to hear you sing Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang. That's a hard one to sing. Hip, hop, hippie, hippie to the hip, hip, hoppy, you don't stop, rap it to the bang, when the boogity, boogity beat. Now, my name is Wonder Mike, and I'd like to say hello to the black, to the brown, the red, and the green, the purple, and hello. But first, I gotta... Now, what you hear is not a test. I'd have to hear it once before. That's a little more difficult. I used to know it all. I don't, though, now. It's faded away. You don't hear that one as much. But I had that Life is a Rock. I don't even know if I had it by reunion. It might have been on one of those K-Tel sound-alike albums, but... Dun, 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 dun. Metalman Vegas says, you did not disappoint them. Well, I try, And if your date starts acting, then you like her friend. I can remember bits and pieces, but not all of it. Anyway, phone lines are open 972-994-6822. And that's, yeah. We will give it another 4 minutes. 4 minutes. I didn't even block their number. I could. Oh, I could. Incidentally, that person has been calling in. I wonder if I can show you. I don't want to dox their number in case it's their real number. I'm almost positive it's not. It's one of those pay for it temporary Google numbers or something, but let's see, I could show you this, though. No, I can't. It's got the number on it. Okay, so wait, hold on. They called in, before I turned on the phone lines, they called in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 times before the phone lines were open. Got a real thinker there. Let's see. Wolf says, I could do it metal, but I don't remember the words. Metalman Vicky says, I think of my dad when we would watch the Knicks on TV with this lyric. I got me a color TV so I could see the Knicks play basketball. Wow, that's just a tad obsessive. Well, if you're going to talk Knicks and basketball, got a basketball, Jones. I got a basketball, Jones. I'm the victim of a basketball, Jones. Basketball Jones, I got a basketball Jones. I could do Black Lassie by Cheech and Chong, I suppose. There's a lot of them out there, but Life is a Rock, I'm pretty good on that. Another one is the Peter Gabriel song, Games Without Frontiers, also has a lot of references, similar to Life is a Rock in that way. In that way. Yes, one day we'll have Tom Gulley's weird-ass music on the Metalman Vicky's Metal Euphoria, which you can hear on SonicAsylumRadio.com every Saturday the server's working, from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And I totally, encourage you to do that. Melanie and Vicky says, yes, the Peter Gabriel song. Also, Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire. Sure. But that's just a list. That's not, I don't know. It just seems like a list. It's an okay song. And they recently redid it and tried to update it. And it just didn't work. Did not work. If you have the time, a lot of people consider Billy Joel to be this sort of fluffy pop singer, not that, this or that. I think he's a genius. I think he's extremely talented. I love all of his music, except maybe maybe the last album, not as good as the rest. But if you go to his official page, there's like a 2 to 6, 7 minute video where he talks about the idea behind each one of his albums. It's really good. It's really, really, really good. You know what I mean? Server best be working on Saturday. I rescheduled my interview from last Saturday. Yes, the Wolf and I were talking on the phone, like really on the phone, because the Wolf has my personal phone number. And we're talking on the phone, and he goes, oh my God, we're missing Metal Maiden Vicky. And I said, well, I'll talk to you later. And I threw my phone down, and we both jumped onto the internet, and we jumped into the chat room, and we started chatting, and I was throwing up these GIFs and about Ball State, and we're both talking. And about 20 minutes later, I clicked back to the main page for some reason and saw your Facebook posting about the fact there wasn't a show. Boy, did I feel like a real jerk. I said, Wolf, I'm a real jerk. Exactly the way it happened. At any rate, I think that's going to do it for tonight. That old clock on the wall says, like the Reverend Billy Shears, it's time for me to get on up out of here. You do not have to go home, but you can't. Wait, hold on. Melanie Vicky says, oh man, so sorry. Glad you guys were in the chat room. Don't be sorry. Do you think the Wolf and I, because we probably had been talking for 7 hours or something. We have these marathon phone calls. Do you think we had anything better to do? No, we didn't. And we were late as hell. It was like 5 o'clock. It wasn't like anyway. I think the only thing left to say, as I secretly tell you that tomorrow night's episode of Overrated, Underrated will have a theme. And the theme, because tomorrow is Valentine's Day, will be love. Just a little hint. With all that being said, I think the only thing left to say is, till next time, we'll see you next time.